His name was Michael, 28 years old, working in marketing for a mid-sized firm in downtown Chicago. You know that feeling when your whole world crumbles in an instant, but you can't even find the words to scream? That's exactly what happened to Michael on a cold Tuesday morning in November. He was standing in the kitchen, coffee mug in hand, watching his wife Sarah pack her suitcase. She wasn't even looking at him. Her long blonde hair fell like a curtain, hiding her face as she folded her clothes with mechanical precision. Michael's younger sister Emily sat at the kitchen table, tears streaming down her face. "Sarah, please," Emily whispered. "You don't have to do this." But Sarah just kept packing. Michael watched as she placed their wedding photo face down in the suitcase. 5 years of marriage, and she was treating their memories like garbage. "Where will you go?" Michael finally asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Sarah paused for just a moment. "You know where," she said without turning around. And that's when Michael's heart truly broke, because yes, he did know where. She was going to David's apartment, his own brother, his older brother who had always been the golden child, the successful one, the charming one who could steal anything he wanted. The front door slammed shut, and Sarah was gone. Emily rushed to hug Michael, but he just stood there, staring at the empty hallway. His neighbors probably heard the door slam. Mrs. Peterson from next door would be gossiping about this for weeks. But Michael didn't care about any of that. What hurt the most wasn't even the betrayal. It was the silence. Sarah hadn't screamed, hadn't thrown accusations, hadn't demanded explanations. She had just left. Like their marriage had meant nothing at all. Emily looked up at her brother's face. "Michael, say something, please." But Michael just walked to the window and watched Sarah get into David's car. David didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. He was grinning, actually grinning, as he helped Sarah with her bags. "I'm going to call Mom," Emily said, reaching for her phone. "No." Michael's voice was calm, too calm. "Don't call anyone, not yet." Emily stared at her brother in disbelief. "Michael, you can't just." "I said no." Michael turned away from the window, and Emily saw something in his eyes that made her step back. It wasn't anger, it wasn't sadness, it was something much more dangerous. It was patience. But this was just the beginning. To understand why Michael stayed silent, you need to know about the Johnson family. Michael had grown up in a typical American household in suburban Illinois. His father had died when he was 16, leaving Mrs. Johnson to raise 3 children on her own. David was 30 now, 2 years older than Michael, and he had always been the star of the family. Captain of the high school football team, full scholarship to Northwestern, now running his own successful consulting firm. You know that guy who seems to have everything handed to him on a silver platter? That was David. Emily was 24, the baby of the family, and she adored both her brothers. She was finishing her master's degree in social work, always trying to fix everyone's problems, always believing the best in people. And then there was Michael, the middle child, the one who worked steady jobs, paid his bills on time, and never caused any drama. He was the reliable one, the one everyone could count on, but somehow never the one anyone really noticed. Mrs. Johnson had always favored David, though she'd never admit it. "David just has that special something," she used to say. "He's going places." Michael had accepted this a long time ago. He'd made peace with being the ordinary son, the backup plan, the one who would take care of Mom when she got older while David lived his glamorous life. But Sarah was supposed to be different. He'd met Sarah at Emily's college graduation party 3 years ago. Sarah Williams, daughter of a wealthy businessman, marketing executive at a Fortune 500 company. She was beautiful, intelligent, and successful in her own right. She didn't need anyone's money or status. The first time Sarah met David, Michael watched her reaction carefully. Most women became a little starry-eyed around his older brother. But Sarah barely glanced at David. She was interested in Michael, genuinely interested in the quiet guy who listened to her stories about work drama and remembered her coffee order. "I like that your brother doesn't try so hard," Sarah had told Michael after their third date. "David's the type who needs everyone to love him, but you're comfortable with who you are." Michael fell in love with her for saying that, for seeing something in him that no one else ever had. They dated for 2 years before getting engaged. The wedding was everything Sarah had dreamed of: a beautiful ceremony at the country club, reception for 200 guests, honeymoon in Italy. Michael's whole family was there, beaming with pride. "Look at our Michael," Mrs. Johnson had whispered to the other mothers at the wedding. "He got himself a real catch." For once in his life, Michael felt like the winner. He had the girl, the successful marriage, the beautiful house in Oak Park. David was still single, still playing the field, still the same charming bachelor he'd always been. But Michael should have known better, should have remembered that David never let anyone else win for long. The first red flag came at last year's Christmas dinner. Sarah and David had spent the entire evening talking about business strategies and market analysis. They both worked in similar fields, they both had MBAs from top schools, they both spoke the same corporate language that Michael had never quite learned. "Your wife is brilliant," David had told Michael that night. "You're a lucky man." At the time, Michael had felt proud. Now, looking back, he could see the hunger in his brother's eyes. David wasn't complimenting Sarah, he was claiming her. Emily knocked on Michael's door around noon, carrying a bag of groceries and wearing her determined big sister expression. "I brought lunch," she announced, "and I'm not leaving until you tell me what really happened." Michael let her in because he didn't have the energy to argue. Emily busied herself making sandwiches, while Michael sat at the kitchen table, staring at his coffee. "How long?" Emily asked, without looking up from the cutting board. "How long what? How long have you known about Sarah and David?" Michael was quiet for so long that Emily stopped cutting and turned to look at him. His face gave her the answer. "Oh, Michael!" Emily's voice broke. "How long have you been carrying this alone?" 6 months, Michael said finally. "I saw them together at that conference in Milwaukee. Sarah said she was going alone, but David was there too. They were having dinner, and they looked like a couple." Emily sank into the chair across from him. "Why didn't you say anything?" "What was I supposed to say? Hey honey, I saw you on a date with my brother." She would have denied it. They both would have, and then I'd be the crazy, jealous husband who doesn't trust his wife. "But Michael, you had proof." "I had suspicions, that's not the same thing." Michael finally looked up at his sister. "Besides, I kept hoping I was wrong, that there was some explanation, that the woman I married wouldn't do this to me." Emily reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "What are you going to do now?" Michael pulled his hand away and stood up. "I'm going to wait." "Wait for what?" A small, cold smile crossed Michael's face. "You'll see." Little did Michael know what was coming. Sarah Williams had always been the girl who got everything she wanted. Growing up as the only daughter of Mr. Williams, one of Chicago's most successful real estate developers, she'd never known what it felt like to be denied anything. But here's the thing about Sarah that most people didn't understand: she was smart enough to know that her privileged life came with expectations. Her father expected her to marry well, to choose a husband who could enhance the family business, someone who moved in the right circles. That's why dating Michael had felt so freeing. Michael worked for a regular marketing firm. He drove a Honda Civic. He shopped at Target and thought Olive Garden was fancy dining. Dating him was like playing hooky from her real life, and Sarah had found that unexpectedly refreshing. "He's so genuine," she used to tell her best friend Jessica over their weekly lunch dates at the country club. "When Michael compliments me, I know he means it. He's not trying to get something from me." Jessica, who came from a similar background, understood the appeal. "Rich guys always want something," she agreed. "Money, connections, status. At least with Michael, you know he just wants you." And for 3 years, that had been enough. Sarah genuinely loved Michael's quiet strength, his loyalty, his complete lack of pretension. She loved how he remembered her favorite flowers, how he made her laugh with his dry sense of humor, how he never tried to change her. The problems started creeping in slowly, so slowly that Sarah barely noticed at first. It began with small things. Sarah's colleagues at work would ask about her husband, and she'd find herself embellishing stories to make Michael sound more impressive. When they attended company parties together, Sarah caught herself making excuses for Michael's simple job, his lack of graduate degree, his unfamiliarity with their world. "Your husband seems sweet," her boss had commented after one particularly awkward dinner party where Michael had spent most of the evening listening quietly while everyone else discussed international markets and corporate acquisitions. Sweet, the word had stung more than Sarah wanted to admit. Then David re-entered the picture. Sarah remembered the exact moment everything changed. It was at Emily's birthday party last spring. David had just returned from a business trip to Tokyo, full of stories about closing a major deal with a tech company. He was tan, confident, speaking casually about million-dollar contracts like other people discussed the weather. "Sarah, right?" David had said, though they'd met several times before. "Michael's better half?" But this time, when David looked at her, really looked at her, Sarah felt something she'd forgotten she was capable of feeling. She felt seen. Not as Michael's wife, not as the rich girl slumming it with a regular guy, but as Sarah Williams, successful executive, worthy partner for someone equally successful. "I've been following your company's expansion," David continued. "Brilliant strategy. The European markets are wide open right now." And just like that, they were deep in conversation about business, about opportunities, about the kind of future Sarah had put on hold when she married Michael. Michael, meanwhile, was in the kitchen helping Emily with the dishes, completely oblivious to the way his brother was looking at his wife. You know that feeling when you realize you've been settling? That's what hit Sarah like a freight train that night. She loved Michael, she really did. But love wasn't enough anymore. She wanted someone who challenged her intellectually, someone who understood her ambitions, someone who could be a real partner in building the kind of life she'd always dreamed of. David started texting her the next week, just business at first, articles he thought she'd find interesting, invitations to networking events, opportunities to discuss strategy. Sarah told herself it was innocent professional collaboration. Michael never questioned why Sarah was suddenly working late so often, why she had so many new work friends to grab drinks with, why she was traveling more for conferences. He trusted her completely, and Sarah used that trust like a weapon. The first time Sarah kissed David, it was after a particularly intense strategy session at his downtown office. They'd been working on a proposal for a joint venture between their companies, and the sexual tension had been building for weeks. "We should stop," Sarah had whispered, even as she leaned closer to him. "Should we?" David's hand was on her face, his thumb tracing her cheek. "Or should we stop pretending this isn't exactly what we both want?" When Sarah came home that night, Michael was waiting with takeout from her favorite Thai restaurant and a bottle of wine. "How was the conference?" he asked, kissing her forehead. "Fine," Sarah lied, and hated herself for how easy it was. But the guilt didn't last long. David made her feel alive in a way she'd forgotten was possible. He challenged her, argued with her, pushed her to be better. When they were together, Sarah felt like the woman she was meant to be, powerful, desirable, worthy of someone equally powerful and desirable. Michael, sweet Michael, just made her feel safe. And Sarah was 26 years old, too young to settle for safe. The affair continued for months. Sarah told herself she was just figuring things out, that she didn't have to choose, that she could have both the security of her marriage and the excitement of her relationship with David. But David wanted more than stolen moments and secret meetings. David wanted everything. "Leave him," David said one night as they lay together in his bed. "We're perfect together, Sarah, we both know it." "It's not that simple," Sarah replied, though her heart was racing. "Michael loves me, he doesn't deserve this." "Then why are you here with me instead of home with him?" Sarah didn't have an answer for that, or rather, she did, but she wasn't ready to say it out loud yet. The decision was made for her when Michael came home early from work one day and found Sarah packing a suitcase. "Where are you going?" he asked quietly. Sarah could have lied, could have said it was another business trip, bought herself more time to figure out how to handle the situation. But looking at Michael's trusting face, at this man who had loved her completely and unconditionally for 5 years, Sarah finally found the courage to be honest. "I'm leaving, Michael, I'm sorry, but I'm leaving." She didn't tell him about David. She couldn't bring herself to twist the knife that deeply, but she saw in Michael's eyes that he already knew. But Sarah had a secret that neither Michael nor David knew about yet. Mrs. Johnson had always prided herself on keeping the family together. Every Sunday dinner, every holiday, every birthday, the Johnson children were expected to show up to maintain the illusion of the perfect American family. So when Sarah left Michael on that Tuesday morning, Mrs. Johnson's first instinct wasn't to comfort her heartbroken son, it was to plan damage control. "We need to have a family meeting," she announced when she called Michael that evening. "This Sunday, David will be there too." Michael closed his eyes, feeling a familiar exhaustion settle over him. "Mom, I don't think that's a good idea right now." Nonsense. Family problems require family solutions. We've always worked things out together, and this won't be any different. This isn't a misunderstanding about whose turn it is to host Thanksgiving, Mom. My wife left me for my brother. The silence on the other end of the phone stretched so long that Michael wondered if the call had dropped. Don't be dramatic, Michael, Mrs. Johnson finally said. I'm sure there's more to this situation than you understand. David would never. And Sarah is such a lovely girl. And there it was, the same old pattern that had defined Michael's entire life. When something went wrong, it was always Michael's fault, Michael's misunderstanding, Michael's overreaction. David could do no wrong in their mother's eyes. Emily, who had been listening to the conversation from the kitchen, grabbed the phone from Michael's hand. Mom, for once in your life, could you please support Michael instead of making excuses for David? Emily Rose Johnson, don't you dare speak to me that way. I raised you better than that, did you? Because the way I see it, you raised one son to think he's entitled to anything he wants, another son to think he doesn't deserve anything good, and a daughter who spent 24 years watching you play favorites. Michael took the phone back before Emily could say something they'd all regret later. We'll be there Sunday, he said quietly, but don't expect this to be some heartwarming family reunion, Mom. Sunday dinner at the Johnson house had always been a production. Mrs. Johnson would cook for hours, setting the table with her good china, making sure everything was perfect for her family gathering. This Sunday, the atmosphere was tense enough to cut with a knife. David arrived 15 minutes late, which was typical. What wasn't typical was that he came alone. Michael had been dreading the moment Sarah would walk through the door on David's arm, but she was nowhere to be seen. Where's Sarah? Emily asked bluntly, because someone had to. David shrugged as he helped himself to a beer from the refrigerator. She's at her father's house. Thought it might be better if she sat this one out. Mrs. Johnson bustled around the kitchen, pretending everything was normal. Well, I think that shows excellent judgment. Family matters should be handled by family. Michael watched his older brother settle into his usual chair at the head of the table, their father's chair, and felt something dark and bitter rise in his chest. David looked completely at ease, like he was attending any other family dinner instead of the aftermath of destroying his brother's marriage. So, David said, cutting into his roast beef, I guess we should talk about the elephant in the room. Yes, Mrs. Johnson said quickly. Michael, I think you owe your brother an apology. The fork in Michael's hand froze halfway to his mouth. I'm sorry, what? You can't go around accusing David of whatever it is you think happened. It's causing unnecessary drama in this family. Emily slammed her glass down so hard that wine splashed onto the white tablecloth. Are you kidding me right now? Emily, Mrs. Johnson started. No, Mom, just no. Sarah left Michael for David. David has been sleeping with his brother's wife. And your first instinct is to blame Michael for causing drama? David leaned back in his chair, studying his fingernails with casual interest. Actually, Emily, it's more complicated than that. Michael finally looked directly at his brother for the first time since he'd arrived. Is it? Please, enlighten us. Sarah wasn't happy, Michael. She hadn't been happy for a long time. You know that, right? You had to have known that. The words hit Michael like physical blows, but he kept his expression neutral. Go on. Come on, be honest. When was the last time you and Sarah had a real conversation? When was the last time she looked at you like you were anything more than, I don't know, a comfortable piece of furniture? David, stop it, Emily warned. But David was just getting started. Sarah is an incredible woman. She's brilliant, ambitious, beautiful. She deserves a partner who can match her energy, who can challenge her, who can give her the kind of life she was meant to have. And you think that's you? Michael's voice was deadly quiet. I know it is. We connect on a level that you never could, Michael. It's not your fault. You're just different people. Mrs. Johnson nodded, like this made perfect sense. David's right, dear. Sometimes these things just happen. No one's really to blame. Michael looked around the table at his family, his mother, who had spent his entire life making excuses for David's selfishness, his brother, who had taken the most precious thing in Michael's life and was now trying to justify it as some kind of favor. Emily was the only one looking at him with anything resembling sympathy. You're right, Michael said finally. Everyone at the table looked surprised. Sarah and I are different people. She's ambitious and successful and brilliant, and I'm just comfortable, reliable, boring. Michael, that's not what I meant, David started. No, it's exactly what you meant, and you know what, you're not wrong. Sarah does deserve someone who can challenge her, someone who can give her everything she wants. Michael stood up, his dinner barely touched. But here's what you don't understand, David. Sarah already had someone who loved her more than his own life. Someone who would have done anything for her, given her anything she asked for. Someone who saw her as perfect exactly as she was. Michael walked to the front door, then turned back to face his family. You can have her, David. You can have the house, the successful wife, the perfect life. But what you'll never have is what I had with her. You'll never love her the way I did, because you don't know how to love anyone more than you love yourself. Michael, wait, Emily called, jumping up from her chair. But Michael was already gone, leaving his family to sit with their uncomfortable truths. As he drove home, Michael's phone buzzed with a text message. For a moment, his heart jumped, thinking it might be Sarah. But it was from Jessica, Sarah's best friend. We need to talk, there's something you need to know about Sarah. Then David entered the picture in a way no one had expected. Jessica Martinez had been Sarah's best friend since their freshman year at Northwestern. They'd pledged the same sorority, interned at the same companies, been each other's maids of honor. If anyone knew Sarah's secrets, it was Jessica. Which is why Michael was surprised when she asked to meet him at a quiet coffee shop downtown instead of simply calling with whatever information she had. Jessica looked nervous when Michael arrived, fidgeting with her wedding ring and avoiding eye contact. She was usually the picture of confidence, a successful attorney married to another successful attorney, the kind of power couple that dominated Chicago's social scene. Thank you for meeting me, she said as Michael sat down across from her. I wasn't sure if you'd want to talk to anyone from Sarah's circle right now. You said there was something I needed to know. Jessica nodded, then pulled out her phone. I'm going to show you something, but I need you to promise me you won't do anything rash, no confrontations, no dramatic gestures. Can you promise me that? Michael studied her face. What is it, Jessica? Promise me first. Fine, I promise. Jessica turned her phone toward him. On the screen was a photo that looked like it had been taken at some kind of corporate event. Sarah was there, looking stunning in a black cocktail dress, but she wasn't with David. She was with another man, older, distinguished, wearing an expensive suit. His hand was on Sarah's waist, and they were looking at each other like they were the only people in the room. Who is that? Michael asked. Richard Blackwood, senior partner at Morrison, Cale Associates, one of the biggest law firms in the city. Michael looked up from the phone. I don't understand. Jessica took a deep breath. Michael, Sarah wasn't just having an affair with David. She was having affairs with multiple men. Chard, David, at least 2 other guys that I know of, maybe more. The coffee shop seemed to spin around Michael. That's impossible. Sarah wouldn't. She's not that kind of person. Isn't she? Jessica's voice was gentle but firm. Michael, I love Sarah like a sister, but she's been collecting powerful men like trophies for the past year. She told me she was keeping her options open until she figured out which one could give her the best life. Michael stared at the photo. The man, Richard, had his hand on Sarah's face, looking at her with obvious adoration. The same way Michael used to look at her. Why are you showing me this? Because David thinks he won. He thinks he was Sarah's choice, that she left you for him specifically. But the truth is, Sarah would have left you for whoever made her the best offer first. Jessica swiped to another photo. This one showed Sarah at what looked like a charity gala with yet another man Michael didn't recognize. That's Marcus Webb, CEO of Webb Industries, divorced, net worth around $50 million. Sarah dated him for 3 months while she was married to you. Michael felt sick. How long have you known about this? I suspected for months, but I got confirmation last week. Sarah called me the night she left you. She was drunk and celebrating, talking about how she was finally free to pursue her real opportunities. She mentioned David, but also Richard, and some new guy she met at a conference in New York. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Jessica looked down at her hands. Because I hoped she'd come to her senses, because I thought maybe if she got it out of her system, she'd realize what she was throwing away. You were good to her, Michael. You were the best thing that ever happened to her, and she was too stupid to see it. Michael closed his eyes, processing this information. Part of him felt vindicated. He hadn't been crazy to suspect something was wrong, but another part of him felt devastated all over again. The woman he'd loved and trusted had been systematically betraying him for months, maybe longer. There's more, Jessica said quietly. The reason she left when she did. Michael, she's pregnant. The blood drained from Michael's face. What? She's about 2 months along, and she doesn't know who the father is. Michael gripped the edge of the table. Does David know? I don't think so. Sarah's been trying to figure out her next move. She's been doing DNA research, trying to narrow down the timeline. For a long moment, Michael just sat there, absorbing the magnitude of Sarah's betrayal. His wife hadn't just left him for his brother, she'd been living a completely double life, using their marriage as a cover while she shopped around for a better option. Why are you telling me all this, Jessica? What do you want me to do with this information? Jessica leaned forward, her expression intense. I want you to protect yourself. Sarah is dangerous, Michael. She's calculating and manipulative, and she will destroy anyone who gets in the way of what she wants. Right now, she's letting David think he's special, but the moment someone better comes along, she'll drop him too. Exactly. And if that baby turns out to be yours? Michael hadn't even considered that possibility. The thought of being tied to Sarah for the rest of his life through a child made him feel physically ill. What should I do? Get a lawyer, today. Protect your assets, document everything. And whatever you do, don't let Sarah know that you know about the others. She's dangerous when she feels cornered. Michael thanked Jessica and left the coffee shop in a daze. As he walked to his car, his PH sheets, one buzzed with a text from an unknown number. We should meet. There are things about your wife you need to know. Richard Blackwood. Michael stared at the message. Apparently, he wasn't the only one who'd been played by Sarah Williams, and it seemed like her other victims were starting to compare notes. This changed everything between them. Richard Blackwood's law office occupied the entire top floor of one of Chicago's most prestigious downtown buildings. Walking into the lobby, Michael felt underdressed in his simple business casual attire, surrounded by marble floors and crystal chandeliers that probably cost more than his annual salary. The receptionist, a perfectly polished young woman who looked like she'd stepped out of a magazine, directed Michael to Mr. Blackwood's corner office. The view of Lake Michigan was breathtaking, but Michael barely noticed it. His attention was focused on the distinguished man behind the massive mahogany desk. Richard Blackwood was everything Michael wasn't: tall, silver-haired, radiating the kind of confidence that came from decades of success. He was probably in his early 50s, but he carried himself like a man who'd never had a moment of self-doubt in his life. Mr. Johnson. Richard stood and extended his hand. Thank you for coming. I know this must be awkward. You could say that. Michael shook the offered hand, noting Richard's firm grip and expensive watch. Your message said there were things I needed to know about my wife. Ex-wife, I assume. I heard she'd left you. The casual way Richard mentioned Sarah's departure stung, but Michael kept his expression neutral. News travels fast in your circles. Richard gestured for Michael to sit in one of the leather chairs facing his desk. Sarah and I, well, let's just say we moved in similar professional circles. I'm sure you can understand how these things develop. Actually, I can't. See, where I come from, married women don't develop relationships with other men. A flicker of something, embarrassment, shame, crossed Richard's face. You're right, there's no excuse for what happened, but I think you deserve to know the truth about who you were married to. Richard opened a file on his deceased K and pulled out several photographs. Michael recognized some of them from Jessica's phone, but there were others he hadn't seen. Sarah at expensive restaurants, Sarah at charity galas, Sarah looking radiant and happy in the arms of various wealthy men. How long? Michael asked. I first met Sarah about 18 months ago at a legal conference. She was there representing her company in some corporate merger discussions. Brilliant woman, absolutely brilliant. Richard's voice carried a note of genuine admiration. She approached me afterward, said she was interested in learning more about corporate law, asked if I'd be willing to mentor her. Michael could picture it perfectly. Sarah's trademark move, the beautiful, ambitious woman seeking guidance from a powerful older man. It was flattering, seductive, and completely calculated. How long before mentoring became something else? 3 months. Sarah was persuasive. She made me feel like the most important man in the world when we were together. Like I was this wise, sophisticated guide, helping her navigate the complexities of corporate life. And you believed that? Richard sank back in his chair, suddenly looking older. I wanted to believe it. My own marriage ended 5 years ago, amicable divorce, but lonely nonetheless. Sarah made me feel young again, vital. She had this way of making you feel like you were the only person in the room who mattered. Michael knew exactly what Richard meant. It had been Sarah's superpower, that ability to make people feel special, chosen. She'd done the same thing to him in the beginning. When did you realize you weren't the only one? 2 weeks ago. I hired a private investigator to look into Sarah's background, standard procedure when you're considering a serious relationship with someone. What I found? Richard shook his head. Michael, your wife was running a sophisticated operation. She had different personas for different men, different stories, different needs. Richard pulled out a thick folder and spread its contents across the desk. Phone records, credit card statements, hotel receipts, restaurant bills. A paper trail of Sarah's double life. With me, she was the ambitious corporate lawyer wannabe, looking for a mentor and father figure. With your brother David, she played the frustrated wife trapped in a boring marriage, seeking excitement and passion. With Marcus Webb, you know about Marcus. Michael nodded grimly. With Marcus, she was the sophisticated socialite, ready to be a trophy wife for the right price. Each man thought he was getting a different version of Sarah, the version of her that perfectly matched what he was looking for. Michael studied the documents, seeing his marriage dissolve into a series of receipts and phone calls. How much money did she get from all of you? Not much directly. Sarah was too smart for that. She never asked for cash or expensive gifts that could be traced. But dinners at 5-star restaurants, weekend trips to luxury resorts, shopping excursions where we'd accidentally buy her things she admired. It adds up. How much? Richard hesitated. In the 8 months we were seeing each other, probably close to $40,000. Michael felt sick. While he was working overtime to pay their mortgage and save for their future, Sarah was living a secret life of luxury funded by her other relationships. There's something else, Richard continued. Something you need to know about the baby. Michael's head snapped up. You know about that? Sarah told me she was pregnant 3 weeks ago. She was emotional, scared. She said the timing was terrible because she was leaving her husband and didn't know how to handle the situation. Did she tell you who the father was? Richard's laugh was bitter. She told me it was mine. Talked about how this could be a new beginning for us, how we could build a family together. I was actually considering it. I'm 53, never had children, thought maybe this was my chance. But then I found out about the others. Sarah told the same story to at least 3 different men. Michael, we all think we're the father. Michael closed his eyes, feeling overwhelmed by the scope of Sarah's deception. What are you going to do? I've already done it. I sent certified letters to David and Marcus, sharing what I'd learned. I figured we all deserved to know what we were dealing with. And? Marcus is furious. Apparently, he was planning to propose to Sarah next month. David's response was interesting. Richard handed Michael a printed email. It was from David, dated yesterday. Richard, thanks for the information. I already suspected Sarah was playing games, but I didn't realize the extent of it. Here's what you don't know. I never cared about Sarah. This was always about my brother. Sarah was just a convenient way to take something he valued. Mission accomplished. David. Michael read the email twice, feeling his world shift again. He never wanted her? Apparently not. According to this, your brother was using Sarah to hurt you, and she was using him to escape her marriage. Neither of them cared about the other. They were just convenient tools for each other's agendas. Michael sat in silence, processing this revelation. His marriage hadn't ended because of some grand passionate love affair. It had ended because 2 selfish people had decided to use each other to get what they wanted, regardless of who got hurt in the process. Why are you telling me all this, Richard? What do you want? Richard stood and walked to the window, gazing out at the lake. Because Sarah destroyed my faith in love, my trust in women, my belief that good people exist in this world. But she destroyed your actual life, your marriage, your family, your home. You deserved better than that. What's your point? Richard turned back to face Michael. My point is that Sarah Williams is about to get away with all of this. She's going to disappear, have her baby, and move on to her next victim. Meanwhile, you'll spend years rebuilding your life. David will go back to his bachelor lifestyle with no consequences, and the rest of us will just be cautionary tales. What are you suggesting? Richard's smile was cold. I'm suggesting that maybe it's time Sarah learned that actions have consequences. I'm suggesting that maybe it's time she discovered what it feels like to have her life destroyed by someone she trusted. Michael studied the older man's face. What exactly are you proposing? Patience, Mr. Johnson. You've been quiet so far, letting everyone think you're just the heartbroken husband. But what if that silence wasn't because you were hurt? What if it was because you were planning? But the worst was yet to come. Richard's private investigator was a woman named Catherine Torres, a former FBI agent who now ran her own firm specializing in corporate espionage and infidelity cases. She was small, sharp-eyed, and had the kind of quiet intensity that made Michael believe she could uncover secrets people didn't even know they were keeping. They met at Catherine's office, a modest space above a deli in Lincoln Park that was a stark contrast to Richard's luxurious law firm, but the computers lining her walls and the sophisticated surveillance equipment on her desk made it clear that Catherine took her work seriously. Mr. Blackwood filled me in on the basics, Catherine said, opening a thick file. Your wife was more interesting than most of my subjects. Usually, people having affairs try to hide their activities. Sarah was almost brazen about it. She spread out a timeline on her desk, a detailed chart showing Sarah's movements over the past 18 months. Color-coded entries showed her various relationships, business trips, and financial transactions. The first thing you need to understand is that Sarah wasn't just cheating on you randomly. This was a planned, systematic operation. She was actively cultivating relationships with wealthy, powerful men while using her marriage to you as a cover story. Michael studied the timeline. Cover story? Think about it from her perspective. She's a beautiful, successful woman in her mid-20s. If she were single and aggressively pursuing relationships with older, wealthy men, people would assume she was a gold digger, but as a married woman having discreet affairs, that suggested passion, forbidden love, excitement, much more appealing to her targets. Catherine pulled out another set of documents. Sarah did extensive research on each man before approaching them. She knew their business interests, their personal histories, their weaknesses. She crafted a different personality for each relationship, designed to be exactly what each man was looking for. How did she manage to keep them all separate? Carefully, she used different phone numbers for different relationships, told each man she preferred to keep their connection private for professional reasons. She scheduled meetings and trips so they wouldn't overlap, and she used your marriage as the perfect excuse for why she couldn't be available all the time. Catherine showed him photos of Sarah at various events, always with a different man, always looking completely natural and comfortable. In some pictures, she looked like a serious business executive. In others, she was the playful girlfriend. With Marcus Webb, she appeared sophisticated and worldly. The scariest part is how good she was at it, Catherine continued. Most people conducting multiple deceptions eventually slip up, get their stories confused, leave obvious evidence, but Sarah was meticulous. She kept detailed notes on each relationship, maintained separate email accounts and social media profiles, even had different wardrobes for different personas. Then how did you catch her? Catherine smiled grimly. Because she got greedy. Sarah was planning to leverage her pregnancy to secure a commitment from whichever man could offer her the best life. But to do that, she needed to know who the biological father was without revealing her deception. Catherine handed Michael a printout of medical records. Sarah scheduled paternity tests at 3 different clinics under false names. She was trying to get DNA samples from her various partners to determine paternity before revealing the pregnancy to anyone. How did she get their DNA? Wine glasses from restaurants, coffee cups from business meetings, even hair from hotel rooms. Sarah was collecting genetic evidence like she was running a forensic investigation. Michael felt a chill run down his spine. The woman he'd been married to wasn't just unfaithful, she was calculating on a level that bordered on sociopathic. There's more, Catherine said. I found evidence that Sarah has done this before. She produced a college newspaper clipping from Northwestern University, dated 6 years earlier. The headline read, "Student accused of academic fraud, claims relationship with professor." That's Sarah? Michael stared at the grainy photograph. Different last name. She was Sarah Chen then, claimed to be adopted by a Chinese-American family. But same face, same MO. She was simultaneously dating a professor, a teaching assistant, and a wealthy alumni donor. When the academic fraud charges came up, apparently, she was submitting the same papers to multiple classes. She claimed she was being targeted because of her relationship with the professor. What happened? Charges were dropped, investigation was buried, and Sarah transferred to a different university to finish her degree, but not before she'd extracted a hefty settlement from the donor who was worried about his reputation. Michael sank back in his chair. How long has she been doing this? Based on what I've found, at least 8 years, Sarah Williams, or whatever her real name is a professional. This is her career. Catherine showed him bank records indicating that Sarah had received regular deposits from various sources over the years, always carefully structured to avoid detection. The marriage to you was probably her longest con, Catherine explained. Stable cover identity, legitimate job history, respectable husband. It gave her credibility and access to social circles she couldn't have reached on her own. And now? Now she's trying to cash out. The pregnancy gives her leverage with her current targets, but it also creates a deadline. She needs to secure her next relationship before the baby is born, and her options become more limited. Catherine pulled out surveillance photos taken just days ago. Sarah was at an upscale restaurant with yet another man Michael didn't recognize. Thomas Hartley. Investment banker, recently divorced, net worth around $20 million. Sarah approached him at a charity auction last week. She's already using the unhappy marriage storyline, but she's also testing out a new angle, the vulnerable single mother looking for a father figure for her child. Michael studied the photos. Sarah looked radiant, happy, completely unburdened by the destruction she'd left behind. She was already moving on to her next victim, while he was still picking up the pieces of his shattered life. What do you recommend I do with all this information? Catherine's expression was serious. That depends on what you want to accomplish, Mr. Johnson. Do you want justice, revenge, or do you just want to make sure Sarah can't do this to anyone else? What's the difference? Justice would be turning this evidence over to the police and letting them handle it. Sarah has committed fraud, identity theft, and possibly extortion. She could face serious criminal charges. And revenge? Revenge would be using this information to destroy Sarah's current operations. Exposing her to her new targets, revealing her deception to her family and employer, making sure everyone knows exactly who and what she is. And protecting others. That would involve a more surgical approach, warning her current and future targets without necessarily destroying her completely. Giving people the information they need to make informed decisions. Michael was quiet for a long moment, weighing his options. Finally, he looked up at Catherine. What if I told you I had a different idea? Something that would accomplish all 3 goals? Catherine raised an eyebrow. I'd say I'm listening. Michael pulled out his phone and scrolled to his calendar. Sarah and I have a wedding anniversary coming up in 2 weeks, October 15th. We always celebrate it at the Drake Hotel, same restaurant, same table, same date every year. You're thinking of confronting her? I'm thinking of giving Sarah exactly what she's always wanted, the perfect audience for her performance. Except this time, all her audiences will be in the same room. Catherine's eyes widened as she understood what Michael was suggesting. You want to invite all of them, David, Richard, Marcus, the new guy? All of them, plus some other interested parties, Sarah's father, her boss, maybe a few reporters who specialize in corporate fraud, everyone who has a stake in knowing the truth about Sarah Williams. That's... Catherine paused, considering the implications. That's brilliant, and completely insane. Will you help me set it up? Catherine grinned. Mr. Johnson, this might be the most interesting case I've ever worked on. Count me in. What Michael discovered shocked him. The next 2 weeks were the most intense of Michael's life. With Catherine's help, he orchestrated what she called the most elaborate exposure operation she'd ever attempted. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Sarah had always been drawn to grand gestures, dramatic moments, situations where she could be the center of attention. So Michael would give her exactly that, a stage where all her deceptions would be revealed simultaneously. The first challenge was getting everyone to the Drake Hotel on October 15th without revealing the true purpose of the gathering. Catherine handled most of the logistics, using different pretexts for different invitees. David received an invitation to what he thought was a celebration of his victory, a dinner where Michael would formally concede defeat and discuss the transfer of assets from the divorce. Richard believed he was attending a legal consultation where Michael would discuss pressing charges against Sarah for fraud, and Richard's testimony would be crucial. Marcus Webb thought he was coming to a business meeting where Michael, as Sarah's husband, would discuss Sarah's financial situation and her ability to enter into new relationships. Thomas Hartley, the new target, was told that Michael was hosting a dinner to introduce Sarah to his family and friends, a gesture of acceptance of their new relationship. Sarah's father, Mr. Williams, was invited to what he believed was a reconciliation dinner where Michael would ask for his help in winning Sarah back. Sarah's boss from her marketing firm received an invitation to a dinner honoring Sarah's professional achievements, hosted by her supportive husband, who wanted to surprise her. And Sarah herself? She thought she was coming to a private anniversary dinner where Michael would make one final plea for their marriage, giving her the perfect opportunity to reject him publicly and announce her pregnancy to solidify her position with her new target. The beauty of this plan, Catherine explained as they went over the final details, is that everyone is coming with their own agenda. They all think they're getting something out of this evening. And Sarah? Sarah thinks she's walking into a room where she holds all the power. She'll have her new boyfriend, her disappointed husband, and her powerful father all watching as she takes control of her narrative one final time. The evening of October 15th, Michael arrived at the Drake Hotel 3 hours early. He'd reserved the private dining room where he and Sarah had celebrated every anniversary, but tonight the intimate space would host 12 people instead of 2. Catherine had positioned cameras throughout the room, not hidden, but not obvious unless someone was looking for them. For legal purposes, she explained, if we're exposing fraud, we need documentation. Emily arrived first, looking nervous but determined. She'd insisted on being there to support her brother, despite Michael's concerns about the family drama that would unfold. Are you sure about this? She asked as they watched the hotel staff arrange the seating chart Catherine had designed to maximize chaos. I've never been more sure of anything in my life, Michael replied. Sarah has been controlling the narrative of our relationship for months. Tonight, the truth controls the narrative. Richard Blackwood arrived next, looking distinguished and curious. He greeted Michael with the cautious respect of one professional to another, but his eyes kept scanning the room as other guests arrived. Marcus Webb entered like he owned the place, which, given his wealth, he practically did. He was younger than Richard but carried himself with the aggressive confidence of a self-made millionaire. His confusion was evident when he saw Richard, whom he clearly recognized from Chicago's business circles. David strolled in 15 minutes late, as usual, but his casual arrogance faltered when he realized this wasn't the private family discussion he'd expected. The sight of Marcus and Richard, 2 men he'd obviously never seen before, clearly unsettled him. Mr. Williams arrived with the punctuality of a lifelong businessman, followed closely by Sarah's boss, Janet Morrison, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s who seemed to take in every detail of the room and its occupants. Thomas Hartley was the last to arrive before Sarah, looking slightly bewildered by the crowd but trying to maintain his composure. He was younger than the other men, probably early 30s, with the kind of earnest handsomeness that Sarah seemed to find irresistible in her victims. Gentlemen, Michael announced once everyone had arrived, thank you all for coming. I know some of you are confused about why you're here, but I promise everything will become clear shortly. Sarah should be arriving any moment. The room buzzed with quiet conversations as the various factions tried to figure out what was happening. David attempted to corner Michael for a private explanation, but Michael smoothly deflected him. Richard and Marcus had gravitated toward each other, their business instincts recognizing a fellow predator. Then Sarah walked in. She was breathtaking, as always. She'd chosen a black cocktail dress that hugged her still slim figure perfectly, her blonde hair styled in elegant waves, her makeup flawless. She looked like she was ready for a magazine photo shoot, completely confident and in control. But as her eyes swept the room and registered the faces looking back at her, Michael watched that confidence crack. Michael, she said slowly, her voice carefully controlled, what's going on here? Who are all these people? Happy anniversary, Sarah, Michael replied, standing at the head of the table. I thought we should celebrate properly this year, with everyone who's been part of our marriage. Sarah's eyes darted from face to face, David looking smug, Richard looking grim, Marcus looking angry, Thomas looking confused, her father looking stern, her boss looking professional but alert. The color was slowly draining from her cheeks. I don't understand, she said, but Michael could hear the tremor in her voice now. Don't you? Let me help you. Michael gestured to the room. Everyone here has played a role in our relationship over the past year. I thought it was time we all met properly. Catherine stepped forward from her position near the cameras. Sarah Williams, my name is Catherine Torres. I'm a private investigator, and I've been documenting your activities for the past month. Sarah's composure finally shattered. She looked wildly around the room, as if searching for an escape route, but there was nowhere to go. Every person in that room represented a piece of her deception, and now they were all staring at her, waiting for explanations she couldn't give. "This is insane," Sarah said, her voice rising. "Michael, what have you done?" "I've done what I should have done months ago," Michael replied calmly. "I've stopped being silent." Then David revealed the truth. The silence in the private dining room was deafening. Sarah stood frozen in the center of the space, surrounded by the fragments of her carefully constructed deceptions. Michael watched as her mind raced, trying to calculate damage control, but there were too many variables, too many people who knew too much. David, ever the opportunist, spoke first. "Well, this is awkward," he said with his trademark smirk. "Sarah, aren't you going to introduce us to your friends?" Sarah's eyes flashed with anger. "David, shut up, you don't understand what's happening here." "Don't I?" David's smile widened. "Actually, I think I understand perfectly. My dear brother has finally grown a spine." Richard Blackwood stood up, his lawyer instincts taking over. "Ms. Williams, I think you owe everyone in this room an explanation." "I don't owe anyone anything," Sarah snapped, but her voice cracked. "Michael, this is cruel, even for you." "Cruel?" Michael's voice remained calm, but there was steel underneath. "Sarah, you've been systematically deceiving everyone in this room for months, some of us for over a year, and you think I'm the one being cruel?" Mr. Williams, who had been silent since Sarah's entrance, finally spoke. "Sarah Elizabeth, what is the meaning of this?" "Michael called me here to discuss your marriage, but these men," he gestured around the room. "Who are these men?" Before Sarah could answer, Marcus Webb stood up, his face red with anger. "I'll tell you who I am, Mr. Williams. I'm Marcus Webb, and I've been dating your daughter for 6 months. She told me her marriage was over, that she was waiting for the divorce to be finalized." Thomas Hartley looked stunned. "Wait, what? Sarah, you told me you were separated. You said the divorce would be final next month. And you told me," Richard added coldly, "that your marriage was a mistake from the beginning, that you'd never really loved your husband." Sarah's father stared at his daughter in horror. "Sarah, please tell me these men are lying." Sarah opened her mouth, then closed it, then opened it again. For the first time in her life, the woman who always had the perfect response was speechless. Catherine stepped forward with her folder of evidence. "Perhaps I can help clarify the situation. Ms. Williams, over the past 18 months, you've been conducting simultaneous relationships with at least 5 different men while married to Mr. Johnson." She began laying out photographs on the table. Sarah at restaurants with Richard, Sarah at charity events with Marcus, Sarah shopping with Thomas, Sarah in David's apartment. "You maintained separate phone numbers, email addresses, and even different personas for each relationship. You told Mr. Blackwood you were an aspiring lawyer. You told Mr. Webb you were ready to leave your career to be a full-time wife and mother. You told Mr. Hartley you were a marketing executive looking for someone who shared your professional ambitions." Sarah's boss, Janet Morrison, who had been quietly observing, spoke up. "Sarah, is this true? Have you been using company resources and time to conduct personal relationships?" "Janet, I can explain. Can you? Because according to these records," Catherine continued, "you've charged personal dinners and hotel stays to your corporate credit card, claiming they were business expenses. That's embezzlement, Ms. Williams." David was laughing now, actually laughing. "Oh, this is rich. Sarah thought she was playing us, but she was the one getting played, by her own greed." "David, stop it," Emily said sharply. "This isn't funny." "Isn't it?" David's eyes glittered with malicious amusement. "My sweet little brother finally outsmarted all of us, even me." Richard looked confused. "What do you mean, da?" Vid turned to address the room like he was giving a presentation. "Gentlemen, let me tell you something about my brother Michael. You all see him as the victim here, the poor, naive husband who got taken advantage of. But Michael has been planning this moment for months." "David," Michael warned. No, let me finish. You see, Michael knew about Sarah's affairs almost from the beginning. He could have confronted her, could have filed for divorce, could have handled this quietly, but instead, he waited, he watched, he documented everything." The room turned to stare at Michael, who remained silent. "Michael let Sarah destroy herself," David continued. "He gave her enough rope to hang herself with, and she took it eagerly. While she thought she was being so clever, manipulating all these powerful men, Michael was building a case that would destroy not just her marriage, but her entire life." Sarah found her voice at last. "That's not true. Michael's not that smart. He's not that calculating. Isn't he?" David pulled out his phone and showed it to the room. Want to know how I really found out about your little operation, Sarah? Michael told me, 6 months ago. He showed me photos, shared his suspicions, asked me to help him gather evidence. The blood drained from Sarah's face. No. You pursued me. You seduced me. Did I? Or did I just play the role Michael asked me to play? The charming older brother, the exciting alternative to boring, reliable Michael? Emily gasped. David, you didn't. Oh, but I did. Michael knew that Sarah would eventually leave him anyway. She was already shopping around for better options. So he decided to control when and how it happened. He made sure she'd leave him for someone he could manipulate, someone who would ultimately betray her. Michael finally spoke, his voice deadly quiet. David, that's enough. Is it? Because I think these gentlemen deserve to know the whole truth. Michael didn't just expose Sarah's deceptions tonight, he orchestrated them. Every affair, every lie, every betrayal, Michael made it possible. Richard looked at Michael with new respect and wariness. Is this true? Michael was silent for a long moment, studying the faces around him. Finally, he nodded. Yes, it's true. The room erupted in shocked voices, but Michael continued speaking, his voice cutting through the chaos. I discovered Sarah's first affair 13 months ago. I hired Catherine to investigate, and we uncovered the scope of her deceptions. I realized that Sarah was never going to stop, never going to be satisfied with just me, never going to be the wife I thought I married. He looked directly at Sarah, who was staring at him like she'd never seen him before. So I decided to give you exactly what you wanted, Sarah. I gave you opportunities to meet wealthy, powerful men. I made sure you had access to social events where you could network. I even gave you the perfect cover story, the neglected wife looking for understanding. You used me, Sarah whispered. I used you? Michael's laugh was bitter. Sarah, you were using me long before I started using you. The difference is, I was trying to protect myself and others from your manipulation. You were just trying to upgrade your lifestyle. Mr. Williams slammed his hand on the table. Enough, Sarah, we're leaving. This is a circus, and I won't have you subjected to this humiliation. No, Sarah said, surprising everyone. No, Dad, I want to hear this. I want to understand exactly how my husband destroyed my life. Michael looked at his wife, his soon-to-be ex-wife, with something that might have been pity. I didn't destroy your life, Sarah. I just made sure that when you destroyed ours, you wouldn't be able to do it to anyone else. Michael couldn't believe what he heard. Sarah stood in the center of the room, surrounded by the wreckage of her carefully constructed lies, and for the first time since Michael had known her, she looked completely defeated, but as he watched her face, he saw something that made his blood run cold. She was smiling. Not the charming, seductive smile she used to manipulate her victims, not the innocent, wounded smile she wore when caught in lies. This was something else entirely, cold, calculating, and utterly without remorse. You think you've won, Sarah said, her voice eerily calm. All of you. You think you've outsmarted me, exposed me, destroyed me, but you have no idea who you're dealing with. Catherine stepped forward, her hand moving instinctively toward the pepper spray on her keychain. Years of investigating dangerous people had taught her to recognize when a situation was about to turn violent. Sarah, I think you should sit down, Janet Morrison said nervously. You're clearly upset. Upset? Sarah laughed, and the sound made everyone in the room uncomfortable. I'm not upset, I'm impressed, especially with you, Michael. I never gave you credit for having this kind of creativity. She walked slowly around the table, making eye contact with each person as she passed. Richard, you pompous fool, did you really think a woman like me would be interested in you for your sparkling personality? You're old enough to be my father. Richard's face flushed red, but he remained silent. Marcus, you pathetic little rich boy, you were so desperate to buy a beautiful wife that you never stopped to wonder why I was for sale. Marcus started to stand, but Thomas Hartley grabbed his arm, sensing the volatility in the room. And Thomas, sweet Thomas, you actually believed I was looking for love. At my age, with my options, how wonderfully naive. She stopped in front of David, studying his face with detached interest. David, you magnificent bastard, I have to admit, you played your part perfectly. The seductive older brother, the forbidden fruit, the chance for me to hurt Michael while upgrading my circumstances, you almost had me convinced you actually wanted me. Sarah, stop this, Emily pleaded, you're scaring people. Sarah turned to Emily with mock sympathy. Poor Emily, always trying to fix things, always believing people can change. You know what your problem is, you think everyone has a conscience. Finally, she came to stand directly in front of Michael. They stared at each other for a long moment, and Michael realized he was looking at a complete stranger. The woman he had loved, married, and shared his life with was gone, if she had ever really existed at all. But you, Michael, Sarah said softly, you surprised me most of all. All these months, I thought I was married to a weak, predictable man who would never have the courage to leave me. I thought I could take my time, explore my options, find the best possible upgrade before discarding you. She reached out and touched his face gently, and Michael forced himself not to flinch away. I never realized I was married to someone who could be just as ruthless as I am. I'm nothing like you, Michael said quietly. Aren't you? You manipulated everyone in this room just as skillfully as I did. You used your own brother, your marriage, even your grief as tools to destroy me. That takes a special kind of coldness, Michael. Sarah stepped back and addressed the room again. Since we're all being so honest tonight, let me share some truths of my own. Michael is right, this isn't the first time I've done this. I've been perfecting this particular skill set for years. She pulled out her phone and began scrolling through what looked like a contact list. Professor Williams at Northwestern. That wasn't his real name, by the way, and he wasn't really my professor. He was a married businessman who thought he was having an affair with a naive college student. I walked away from that relationship with enough money to finish school debt-free. Catherine was frantically taking notes, recognizing a confession when she heard one. James Morrison in Minneapolis. Yes, Janet, he's your cousin, married father of 3 who thought I was his soulmate. He paid for my MBA. Janet Morrison looked like she was going to be sick. Robert Chen in San Francisco. That's where I got the fake name from, by the way. Chinese-American tech executive who wanted an exotic young girlfriend. He funded my first year in Chicago. Sarah continued down her list, naming names, detailing cons, describing years of systematic manipulation and fraud. With each revelation, the people in the room looked more horrified, but Sarah seemed to be enjoying herself. The beautiful thing about men, she said, is that they're all so predictable. They all want the same things, to feel powerful, desired, younger than they are. They all believe they're special, that they're different from all the other men who've disappointed women before them. She looked directly at Michael again. Even you, Michael. Do you think your elaborate revenge plot makes you different from them? You wanted to feel powerful too. You wanted to be the one in control for once in your pathetic life. The difference, Michael said calmly, is that I was trying to protect people from you. You were just trying to exploit them. Protect them? Sarah's laugh was genuinely amused. Michael, look around this room. Do any of these people look protected to you? She was right, and Michael knew it. Richard looked devastated, Marcus was furious, Thomas seemed lost, and her father appeared to be aging 10 years by the minute. You didn't protect anyone, Sarah continued. You just made sure that when I destroyed them, you got to watch. The accusation hit Michael like a physical blow, because somewhere deep down, he knew there was truth in it. He had enjoyed watching Sarah's victims realize how they'd been played. He had taken satisfaction in her downfall. Maybe he wasn't as different from her as he wanted to believe. But here's what none of you understand, Sarah said, her voice dropping to almost a whisper. This isn't over. She pulled out a different phone, one Michael had never seen before. While you were all planning this little intervention, I was making my own preparations. You see, I knew this day would come eventually. I'm very good at reading people, and I could tell that Michael was getting suspicious. She showed them the phone's screen, which displayed what looked like a secure messaging app. I've been documenting everything too. Every conversation, every meeting, every moment of this ridiculous relationship. And I've been sharing it all with some very interested parties. Catherine's eyes widened. Who? The IRS, for starters. Did you know that Richard here has been claiming our dinners as business expenses? That Marcus has been using his corporate accounts to pay for personal entertainment? That Thomas has been embezzling from his investment clients to fund his lavish lifestyle? The men she'd named looked stricken. And Michael, sweet Michael. Did you know that orchestrating fraud, even if you're exposing fraud, is still conspiracy? That using a private investigator to gather evidence through deception is still illegal surveillance? Catherine stepped forward. That's not true. Isn't it? Are you licensed to operate in Illinois, Ms. Torres? Because according to my research, your license expired 6 months ago. The room went silent except for the sound of Sarah typing on her phone. I'm sending everything to the FBI, the State Attorney General, the IRS, and several very interested journalists. By tomorrow morning, everyone in this room will be under investigation for something. She smiled that cold, calculating smile again. The beautiful thing about setting a trap is that sometimes the people who think they're the hunters turn out to be the prey. Everything Michael believed was a lie. The silence that followed Sarah's threat was broken by the sound of slow clapping. Everyone turned to see Catherine Torres applauding with a look of genuine admiration on her face. Bravo, Sarah, that was a masterful performance. You almost had me convinced that you had the upper hand. Sarah's confident expression flickered for just a moment. What do you mean? Catherine smiled. I mean that while you were busy congratulating yourself on being the smartest person in the room, you just confessed to multiple felonies in front of witnesses and cameras. She gestured to the recording equipment positioned around the room. Wire fraud, identity theft, extortion, tax evasion, embezzlement, and that's just from the last 5 minutes. But please, continue, you were just getting to the good parts. Sarah's face went pale as she realized her mistake. In her anger and desire to hurt everyone else, she had just provided law enforcement with enough evidence to put her away for years. Those recordings are inadmissible, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. I didn't consent to being recorded. Actually, you did. Richard Blackwood spoke up, pulling out his phone. When you entered this private dining room, you passed several clearly posted signs indicating that this was a recorded business meeting. Illinois is a one-party consent state, which means any person involved in a conversation can record it without notifying the others. Catherine nodded. And since Mr. Johnson is technically still your husband, he had the legal right to record conversations with you about your marriage and finances. Sarah looked around the room desperately, searching for an escape, but there wasn't one. Her phone began buzzing insistently. Apparently, her threats to contact various government agencies had backfired spectacularly. The FBI is very interested in speaking with you, TA. Doreen continued. It turns out that several of your previous victims filed complaints over the years, but there was never enough evidence to build a case, until now. Michael watched his wife's face as the reality of her situation sank in. For all her talk about being smarter than everyone else, Sarah had made the classic mistake of every con artist. She had gotten arrogant and careless. There's something else you should know, Michael said quietly. The baby. Sarah's hand moved instinctively to her stomach. What about it? We know you've been trying to determine paternity through illegal DNA collection, but you don't need to wonder anymore. Michael pulled out a manila envelope and handed it to Catherine, who opened it and removed several documents. DNA results, Catherine announced, obtained legally through court order once we had evidence of fraud. The baby isn't Michael's, it isn't Richard's, Marcus's or Thomas's either. That's impossible, Sarah whispered. Is it? Because according to these results, the father is someone you haven't mentioned tonight. Someone you've been very careful to keep separate from your other relationships. Catherine pulled out a photograph of Sarah with a man Michael didn't recognize, younger than her other targets, casually dressed, clearly not wealthy. Ryan Mitchell, 24 years old, works as a bartender at the hotel where you've been meeting your various boyfriends. According to his statement, you've been sleeping with him for over a year, telling him you're getting divorced and planning to start a new life together. Sarah sank into the nearest chair, all fight gone out of her. You see, Sarah, Michael continued, while you were busy manipulating wealthy men for their money and status, you were having unprotected sex with a bartender because he made you feel young and reckless. The very thing you despised about being married to me, being ordinary, is exactly what you were doing in secret. David shook his head in amazement. She played herself. There's more, Catherine said. Ryan filed a police report yesterday. He claims you've been stealing money from his apartment, using his credit cards without permission, and threatening to accuse him of rape if he tried to leave you. Sarah's head snapped up. That's not true. Isn't it? Because we have video evidence of you taking money from his wallet while he was sleeping. Hotel security cameras are very thorough these days. Michael looked at the woman he had once loved and felt something he hadn't expected, pity. Sarah had been so focused on orchestrating elaborate cons against wealthy men that she had completely lost control of her actual life. The irony is, Michael said, if you had just been honest with me from the beginning, if you had told me you weren't happy and wanted a divorce, I would have given you half of everything and walked away quietly. You could have had a clean start, a legitimate fresh beginning. But that wasn't enough, was it? Emily added, speaking for the first time in several minutes. You didn't just want a divorce, you wanted to destroy Michael completely while upgrading your life circumstances. Sarah looked up at Emily with undisguised hatred. And what would you know about it? You're 24 years old and still living off your family. You've never had to fight for anything in your life. You're right, Emily said calmly. I've been fortunate. But I've also never had to lie, cheat and steal to get what I wanted. I've never had to destroy other people to feel good about myself. Mr. Williams, who had been silent through most of Sarah's confession, finally stood up. Sarah Elizabeth, you are no longer my daughter. I will not have the Williams name associated with this kind of behavior. Daddy, you can't. I can and I will. As of tomorrow, you will be removed from my will, my insurance policies, and my business. You are on your own. Sarah began to cry, real tears this time, not the calculated displays of emotion she used to manipulate her victims. You don't understand, she sobbed. I was trying to build something. I was trying to create a life worth living. I didn't want to be ordinary. There's nothing ordinary about love, Sarah, Michael said gently. There's nothing ordinary about building a life with someone, facing challenges together, growing old together. That's extraordinary, but you threw it away because it wasn't exciting enough for you. Police sirens could be heard outside the hotel. Catherine had apparently called them while Sarah was busy confessing to her crimes. Sarah Williams, Catherine said formally, you're under arrest for wire fraud, identity theft, embezzlement, and conspiracy to commit extortion. As the police officers entered the private dining room, Sarah looked around at the faces staring back at her. For the first time since Michael had known her, she looked her age, young, scared, and completely out of her depth. Michael, she said as the handcuffs clicked into place, I'm sorry, I really am sorry. Michael studied her face, looking for any sign of genuine remorse. What he saw instead was just another manipulation, one last attempt to gain sympathy. No, you're not, he said quietly. You're sorry you got caught, there's a difference. As Sarah was led away, the room fell into an uncomfortable silence. Everyone who remained was processing their own role in the evening's revelations, their own mistakes and vulnerabilities that Sarah had exploited. Michael had to choose. The private dining room felt hollow after Sarah's arrest. The men she had deceived sat in stunned silence, each processing their own humiliation and betrayal in different ways. Michael remained at the head of the table, watching them struggle with the reality of what they had experienced. Richard Blackwood was the first to speak. Michael, I owe you an apology. When I first contacted you, I thought you were just another victim. I didn't realize you were conducting your own investigation. We were all victims, Michael replied. The difference is that I had the advantage of being married to her. I could see the patterns, the inconsistencies, the lies up close. Marcus Webb laughed bitterly. I can't believe I was planning to propose to her. I had the ring picked out, the restaurant reserved. I was going to ask a woman who was actively conning me to be my wife. Thomas Hartley looked the most shaken of all Sarah's victims. How do we move forward from this? How do we trust anyone again? You learn, Emily said gently. You learn to recognize the warning signs, to trust your instincts when something feels wrong, to ask questions instead of just accepting what people tell you. David, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, finally spoke up. I need to apologize too, to all of you, but especially to Michael. Everyone turned to look at him, surprised by the admission. When Michael first told me about Sarah's affairs, I thought this would be a fun game. The chance to seduce my brother's wife, to prove I could take anything I wanted from him. I didn't think about the consequences, about how it would affect everyone involved. He looked directly at Michael. I used your marriage as entertainment, and I helped destroy something that meant everything to you. I'm sorry, Michael. I'm truly sorry. Michael studied his brother's face, looking for signs of manipulation. But what he saw was genuine remorse. The worst part, David continued, is that Sarah was right about me. I am entitled. I do think I deserve whatever I want, regardless of who gets hurt. Tonight made me realize what kind of person I've become. Mrs. Johnson, who had arrived at the hotel after hearing about the arrests, entered the dining room looking devastated. My boys, she said, looking between Michael and David. What have we done to our family? We've learned the truth, Michael said simply, about Sarah, about ourselves, about what really matters. He stood up and addressed the room. I want everyone to understand something. Tonight wasn't about revenge, it was about justice. Sarah would have continued destroying lives if we hadn't stopped her. She had already moved on to new victims, and she would have kept going until someone finally held her accountable. Catherine Torres, who had returned from giving her statement to the police, nodded in agreement. The FBI estimates that Sarah has defrauded at least 15 people over the past 8 years. The total amount stolen exceeds $200,000. Without tonight's evidence, she never would have been prosecuted. Mr. Williams, who looked like he had aged a decade in the past few hours, spoke up. Michael, I need to know, did Sarah ever love you? Was any of it real? Michael considered the question carefully. I think Sarah loved the idea of being married to me. She loved the stability it provided, the cover story it gave her, the access it granted to people and opportunities she couldn't have reached on her own. But did she love me as a person? No, I don't think Sarah is capable of loving anyone more than she loves herself. What happens now? Thomas asked. Catherine answered. Sarah will be charged with multiple felonies, given the evidence we've gathered and her confession tonight. She's looking at 5 to 10 years in prison. The baby will be placed with Ryan Mitchell's family, assuming they want custody, or with social services if they don't. And the rest of us? You were victims of fraud. The money you spent on Sarah, the gifts you gave her, the emotional damage she caused, those are all legitimate losses that you can pursue through civil court, but criminally, you've done nothing wrong. Michael looked at each person in the room. I want to make something clear. What happened tonight stays between us. I won't be talking to reporters, writing books, or turning this into entertainment. Sarah's crimes will be prosecuted, but your personal business remains private. Richard Blackwood nodded gratefully. Thank you, my law practice would suffer significantly if the details of this became public. As would my business, Marcus added. But, Michael continued, I hope everyone learned something from this experience. Sarah was able to manipulate all of us because we were looking for something we felt was missing from our lives. She gave each of us exactly what we thought we wanted, and we stopped asking questions. He looked directly at David. Some of us were looking for excitement, for the thrill of taking something forbidden. Then at Richard. Some of us were looking for youth, for someone to make us feel vital and important again. At Marcus. Some of us were looking for a trophy, someone beautiful and accomplished to display as proof of our success. At Thomas. And some of us were just looking for love, for someone to share our lives with. Finally, he looked at his mother and Emily. The problem is that when we're looking for someone to complete us, to fill in the missing pieces of our lives, we become vulnerable to people who will tell us exactly what we want to hear. Mrs. Johnson wiped tears from her eyes. Michael, I'm so sorry. I failed you as a mother. I should have seen what Sarah was doing, should have protected you from her. Mom, Sarah fooled everyone. She was a professional, but what I learned tonight is that the people who really matter, my family, my real friends, they're still here. They showed up when I needed them. He looked around the room one more time. We all made mistakes. We all got played by a master manipulator. But we survived, and we learned, and hopefully, we'll all be better people because of it. Emily stood up and hugged her brother tightly. I'm proud of you, Michael. You could have just quietly divorced Sarah and walked away. Instead, you made sure she couldn't do this to anyone else. I did what I had to do, Michael said, but I couldn't have done it alone. Catherine packed up her equipment and files. The FBI will need formal statements from all of you over the next few weeks, but tonight, you should all go home and try to process what happened here. As people began to leave, David lingered behind. Michael, I know you probably can't forgive me right away, but I want you to know that I'm going to change. I'm going to figure out how to be a better person, a better brother. Michael looked at David for a long moment. We all have work to do, David. On ourselves, on our relationships, on our family. But we can do it together, if you're willing. David nodded, his eyes bright with unshed tears. I'm willing. As Michael finally left the Drake Hotel, walking out into the cold Chicago night, he felt something he hadn't experienced in over a year. He felt free. What happened next changed everything. 6 months later, Michael stood in the same spot where his marriage had ended, the kitchen of his Oak Park house, but everything was different now. The house felt warm again, lived in, full of the comfortable chaos of family life. Emily had moved in temporarily while finishing her master's thesis, and her presence had helped heal the emptiness that Sarah's departure had left behind. Books and research papers covered the dining room table, coffee cups accumulated on every surface, and the sounds of normal life had returned to the space that had once been a carefully curated showcase. "Michael, you have a visitor," Emily called from the front door. He looked up from his laptop, where he'd been working on a project proposal, to see Catherine Torres walking into his kitchen. She looked different, more relaxed, less intensely focused than she had during the investigation. "Catherine, this is a surprise. Everything okay?" "More than okay," she said, accepting his offer of coffee. "I wanted to give you an update on Sarah's case and to discuss a proposition." Michael settled into the chair across from her. Over the past 6 months, Catherine had become something like a friend. Their shared experience of exposing Sarah's crimes had created an unexpected bond. "The sentencing hearing is next week," Catherine began. "The prosecutor expects she'll get 7 years, with possibility of parole in 5. The federal charges added significant time to her sentence. And Ryan, the baby? Ryan's sister adopted the baby. She's a nurse in Milwaukee, married with 2 kids of her own. The little girl will have a good life, far away from all this drama." Michael nodded. He'd followed the case closely, not out of vindictiveness, but from a need to see justice done properly. "Ryan seems like a good kid who got in over his head," Catherine continued. "He's testifying against Sarah. In exchange for immunity, turns out she really was stealing from him and threatening him when he tried to break things off. And the others? Richard, Marcus, Thomas? They've all moved on, in their own ways. Richard retired early and moved to Florida, said he wanted to get out of the dating scene entirely. Marcus is in therapy, working through trust issues, and Thomas actually thanked you last week, said the experience taught him to slow down and really get to know people before getting serious." Michael smiled. "At least some good came out of all this." "More than you know, which brings me to my proposition." Catherine leaned forward, her expression becoming businesslike. "I've been getting calls from other victims of similar scams. Apparently, word has gotten out about how we handled Sarah's case. People want my help, but they also want someone who understands the personal side of this kind of betrayal." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I'd like to partner with you, not as a private investigator. You'd need training and licensing for that, but as a consultant, someone who can help victims understand their options, navigate the emotional aspects of fraud cases, maybe even help set up controlled confrontations like we did with Sarah." Michael considered this. Over the past 6 months, he'd discovered that helping expose Sarah had given him a sense of purpose he'd never found in his marketing job. "You want me to help other people who've been conned? I want us to help them, together. You have insights into how these predators operate, how they choose their victims, how they maintain their deceptions. And you understand the recovery process in a way that I, as an outsider, never could." Before Michael could respond, his phone rang. The caller ID showed David's name. "Excuse me," he said to Catherine, then answered, "Hey, David." "Michael, are you busy? I wanted to run something by you." "Actually, Catherine Torres is here. We're discussing a business proposition." "Perfect timing then. I'll be right over." Michael hung up and looked at Catherine apologetically. "David's been different since everything happened. More thoughtful, more considerate. He's actually been helpful with some of the legal aftermath." "How do you feel about working with him again?" "Cautiously optimistic. People can change, but it takes time to rebuild trust." David arrived 15 minutes later, carrying a folder of documents and wearing the kind of serious expression that had become his default over the past months. "Catherine, good to see you," he said, then turned to Michael. "I wanted to discuss the foundation proposal with you before you made any other commitments." "What foundation?" David opened his folder and spread out papers on the kitchen table. "The Johnson Foundation for Fraud Prevention. I've been working with lawyers and accountants to set it up as a non-profit organization." Michael stared at his brother. "You want to start a foundation?" "Not just me, us, you, me, Emily if she's interested. The idea is to provide resources for fraud victims, legal assistance, counseling services, education programs. We'd work with law enforcement to identify and prosecute scammers, and with victims to help them recover." Catherine examined the documents with professional interest. "This is impressive, David, very thorough." "I've been working on it for 3 months. The idea came from watching Michael handle the aftermath of Sarah's case. There's a real need for this kind of support system." Michael looked between Catherine and David, processing the implications of both proposals. "You both want me to make helping fraud victims my career?" "Not just fraud victims," Emily said, entering the kitchen with her arms full of groceries. Any victims of emotional manipulation, psychological abuse, systematic deception? There are a lot of people out there who need someone who understands what they've been through. She began unpacking groceries as she continued. Michael, you've always been the person people come to for advice, for support, for practical help. Sarah's case just showed you how to use those skills on a larger scale. Michael walked to the window, looking out at the neighborhood where he'd planned to build a life with Sarah. Now that future was gone, but maybe a better one was possible. What would this look like, practically speaking? David answered. The foundation would provide funding and legal structure. Catherine's firm would handle the investigative work. You'd coordinate with victims, help them understand their options, provide emotional support throughout the process. And Emily? I'd finish my degree and join as a counselor. I'm already writing my thesis on psychological recovery from betrayal trauma. Catherine nodded. It would be a comprehensive approach: investigation, legal action, emotional support, and prevention education. We could really make a difference. Michael turned back to face them. His family, his friend, his potential partners in something meaningful. Sarah always said I was ordinary, that I lacked ambition, that I was too comfortable with being average. Sarah was an idiot, Emily said bluntly. You orchestrated one of the most sophisticated fraud investigations I've ever seen. You brought together multiple victims, gathered evidence, and exposed a career criminal. That's not ordinary. Plus, David added, ordinary isn't an insult. Ordinary people are the ones who hold society together, who do the right thing even when it's difficult, who care more about others than about themselves. Michael looked around his kitchen, at these people who had stood by him through the worst experience of his life. 6 months ago, he'd thought his life was over. Now, he was being offered the chance to build something completely new. Okay, he said finally. Let's do it. Catherine grinned. Really? Really, but I have conditions. Name them, David said. First, we do this right. No shortcuts, no compromises on ethics, no personal vendettas. We help people, but we don't become vigilantes. Agreed. Second, family comes first. This can't become more important than our relationships with each other. Emily nodded. Absolutely. And third, Michael looked directly at David. You have to prove that you've really changed, not just in business, but in how you treat people, how you handle relationships, how you think about what you deserve versus what you've earned. David met his brother's gaze steadily. I understand. And I'll prove it, Michael. Every day. As they spent the rest of the afternoon planning their new venture, Michael felt something he hadn't experienced since before he'd discovered Sarah's betrayal. He felt hopeful. The phone rang just as they were finishing up. Michael glanced at the caller ID and didn't recognize the number. Hello? Mr. Johnson, this is Detective Martinez with the Chicago Police Department. We have a situation that we think might interest you. A woman named Lisa Chen was just arrested for running a marriage fraud scheme very similar to the Sarah Williams case. She had your business card in her possession, along with detailed notes about your investigation methods. Michael looked at Catherine, David and Emily, who had all stopped what they were doing to listen. Detective, I think you should know, we just started a foundation specifically to help with cases like this. That's interesting timing, Mr. Johnson. Would you be available to consult on this investigation? Michael smiled, feeling the pieces of his new life clicking into place. Detective, we'll be right there. As they gathered their things and prepared to leave for their first official case, Michael realized that Sarah had been right about one thing. He wasn't the same man she had left 6 months ago. He was better than that man, stronger, wiser, and ready to help other people avoid the pain he had experienced. Sarah had tried to destroy him, but instead, she had helped him discover who he really was, and who he really was turned out to be pretty extraordinary after all. To find out what happens next in Michael's new life as a fraud investigator, and to see how the Johnson Foundation handles their first case, watch tomorrow's episode.